Good morning, guys. In the last session, we discussed about what is a Spring Boot and what are the advantages of going for Spring Boot. Spring Boot is one approach to develop Spring applications with less configurations. Spring Boot is an enhancement of the Spring framework and Spring Boot internally using Spring only. So what type of applications we can develop using Spring framework? Same type of applications can be developed by using Boot also. What are the advantages of going for Boot? First one is auto configuration. Second one is form starters. Third one is embedded servers. Fourth one, rapid development. Fifth one, actuators. So auto configuration means it will identify the configuration required for the project and it is going to do that configuration. Form starters are nothing but the dependencies that we are going to use in our application development. And web starters nothing but to run the web application we need some servers. Spring Boot is going to take care of the servers required for the project. Those are called as embedded servers. Application development can be fast. Rapid development is possible with the Spring Boot because configurations are taken care by Spring Boot. We need to concentrate only on the business logic development. And another advantage, Spring Boot is providing actuators. Actuators are used to monitor and manage our application. So those are called as production ready features of our application. Fine. Now let us try to create the boot application now. Building first Spring Boot application. Building first Spring Boot application. Building first Spring Boot application. Right. We can create the boot application in two ways. We can create boot application in two ways. One is using Spring Initializer website. Using Spring Initializer website that we can access by using start.spring.io, and the second one is using IDE. So how many ways we can create the boot applications, guys? Boot application, how many ways we can create the boot application? Boot application we can create in two ways. One is by using initializer website, that is start.spring.io, and the second one is using IDE. Now let me go with start.spring.io first. Let me show you the process. Let me show you the process. How can we create boot application from initializer website? So we can go and access the website, that is start.spring.io. This is the Spring Initializer website. From here we can create our boot application. From here we can create our boot application. So I'm selecting the project type as a Maven and the language I'm selecting as a Java. Spring Boot supports for three things: Kotlin, Groovy and Java. So I'm selecting Java. You can use either Maven or Gradle. Here I'm using Maven. Boot current stable version is 2.7. The current stable version of the Spring Boot is 2.7. Here we can select a group ID, we can select the artifact ID, packaging type and Java version. Group ID we are going to set as our company name or our project name, in.AhokIT. Artifact ID is our project name that we are going to specify. Artifact ID we are going to specify as our project name, and package name, whatever the package you want for your project, you can specify the name of the package. By default, one Java class will be created inside this package. We can give that package name. Packaging type. Do you want to create your application as a standalone application or web application? For standalone applications, we can choose jar format. For web applications, we are going to choose var format. It is first application, so I'm creating a standalone, so I'm choosing jar option. Which version of Java? So I'm using Java 8 version to create the project. Can you see the options I have selected? Guys, can you see the options that I have selected to create our first application by using Spring Initializer website? I'm selecting the project as a Maven project. Language I'm selecting as a Java. Boot version I'm selecting as 2.7.0. Group ID in.AhokIT. Artifact ID we can give as a project name. Artifact ID we can give as a project name. So let me give it as 08 Spring Boot application. Package name I am giving as in.AhokIT. Packaging type is jar and Java version 8. Then click on generate. When you click on generate, the Spring Boot application created and downloaded in the form of a zip file. Can you guys do this project creation now? Can you guys do this project creation? I gave the link in the chat box. You can also create the project from this initializer website. Are you guys able to create it? Yes. Once it is created, then we have downloaded that file, right? Go to download section. Here the boot application created and downloaded in the form of a zip file. Let's extract this. Extract all. We are extracting. Now see, the boot application got extracted. Now take this file, go to your IDE. Here we have the option file, import. It is a Maven project, right? So select Maven, existing Maven projects. Next, give the root directory, browse, click on finish. Now you can see the application got imported. So what we have done, go to start.spring.io and generate the project. It will download the project. It will download project in zip file. Yes, extract that zip. Extract that zip file. Go to IDE. Go to IDE. New. Go to IDE. Click on new. Click on Maven. Go to IDE. Click on new. Import Maven. Existing Maven projects. Existing Maven project. Select project path up to pom.xml file location. Then that project got imported into our IDE, creating project with start.io. Creating project using start.spring.io. So here go to start.spring.io website and generate the project. So there we are going to provide the details. To create the project, we are selecting the project build tool as Maven. Project language we are selecting as Java. Boot version we are selecting as 2.7.0. Metadata. Group ID will be our domain name and artifact ID is our project name. Packaging type is jar. Java version 8. I click on generate. So when I click on generate, it is downloading a zip file. I'm extracting that zip file. Then I'm going to my IDE, new option, import option, Maven, existing Maven project, select project path up to pom.xml file. Then project got imported into our IDE. The project got imported into IDE. Is this clear, guys, all of you? Are you able to do this process? Are you guys able to do this process? Yep, do it. I will wait for 2 minutes. Quickly complete. All of you try this process to create the project using Spring Initializer website. Create the project using Initializer website. This is one approach to develop the boot application. Then import that project into IDE. This is one way. Second approach is available. If we are using Spring Toolsuite IDE, we can create the project directly from the IDE also. If we are using Spring Toolsuite IDE, we can create the project directly from IDE itself. Now check it. When you go for this IDE file option, new, we have an option called Spring Starter Project. Spring Starter Project is nothing but Spring Boot application. File, new, Spring Starter Project. Now, here I am giving name of the project. Here I am giving the name of the project 09 Spring Boot application. You can give any name for that. When we are trying to create the application by using IDE also, internally it is communicating with start.spring.io website only. When I am using IDE also, internally it is connecting with start.spring.io only to create the boot application. Maven is the type I am using. Packaging jar, Java version 8, language Java. Group ID, you can give your company domain name. Artifact ID is the project name, version. Package name, I'm giving the package name as in.AhokIT. Click on next. Here, which version of the Spring Boot you want to use to create the project? Boot version 2.7.0. For your project, do you want any dependencies? Like, do you want to communicate with the database? Do you want to implement security? Do you want to implement email? Do you want to add the actuators? For that, we need to add the dependencies. For first application, I'm not going to add any dependencies like that. Just I'm creating the project. Next. Now you see, when I am creating the project by using IDE also, internally, it is communicating with start.spring.io website only. Start.spring.io. This is the request which prepared. Whatever the options we have selected, all the options are prepared as query parameters to the URL and sending a request to start.spring.io. Click on finish. So that means IDE also internally communicating with this initializer website only to create the project. It is a web service communication. Programmer is trying to create a project by using IDE. IDE internally talking to initializer website to create the project. So if you want to create the Spring Boot application, we have two options. Either you can go for IDE and you can create it, or you can go for start.spring.io website to create the project. Project creation using start.spring.io. Creating project using STS IDE. How to create the project using STS IDE? Creating project using STS IDE. Okay. Now go to STS IDE. Then we have a option called new option. There we have Spring Starter project option. Fill the details and create the project. Note, STS IDE will use start.spring.io internally to create the project. So to create Spring Boot application, internet connection is mandatory for our system. To create Spring Boot application, internet connection is mandatory for our application. If you are using initializer website, then you need to go to this website. Net connection is required. If you are using STS IDE also, net connection is required because this IDE internally communicating with initializer website only to create the project. Okay, fine. One Spring Boot application got created. So here we are creating a Spring Boot application. Normally we are creating by using a build tool like a Maven. Are we creating Spring Boot application directly, or we are using a Maven to create the Spring Boot application? We are using Maven to create directly. Suraj, we are not creating directly, man. We are using Maven as a build tool. You see here, are we selecting the build tool? What type of project? Do you want to create a Maven project or a Gradle project? We are selecting the option as a Maven. Similarly, when we are creating the project by using IDE also, we are selecting Maven. Can you see the project folder structure? Guys? What is created? Can you see the project folder structure? SRC main Java, SRC main resources, SRC test Java, some files got, some folders got created. Okay, right? Fine. Spring Boot application we have created. Boot application folder structure. Spring Boot application folder structure. Spring Boot application folder structure. Once you create the project, we want to understand what is this folder structure. So now we created this project 09 Spring Boot app. This is our root folder. This is the project name. we can say it is a root folder. Inside this we are having src main Java, and we are having src main resources. We are having src test Java, and we are having one target folder, and we are having pom.xml. This is the folder structure we got for our project. Is it a folder structure of a Spring Boot, or it is the folder structure of a Maven, guys? Is this the folder structure of a Spring Boot, or it is the folder structure of Maven? It is the folder structure of the Maven. Folder structure of a Maven. src main Java, src main resources, src test Java, target folder, and pom.xml, and we can see there is one more folder called Maven dependencies folder got created. In the src main Java, it got one class also by default, which is called as application.java. This is start class. This is start class. In the src main resources, we got one file also which is called as application.properties. In the test Java, we got one class called application test.java. So this is the folder structure which got created for our Spring Boot application. Observe this folder structure. Boot application got created with src main Java. In the src main Java, one class also created by default with a name called application.java. And in the src main resources, one file got created that is called application.properties file. In the src test Java, application test.java, one class got created. Maven dependencies, all the jar files which are downloaded here. Maven dependencies, it contains jars which got downloaded. Target folder, it contains dot class files. Target folder contains dot class files. pom.xml, it is Maven input file, Maven configuration file, Maven configuration file, Maven configuration file. This is the folder structure that got created for our Spring Boot. If you create this project from initializer website, or if you create this project from IDE also, the project structure will be same. Main Java, main resources, test Java, Maven dependencies, target folder, and pom.xml. Could you please observe this folder structure? Guys, all of you clear with the process, how to create the Spring Boot application, how many ways we can create the boot application, and what is the folder structure. Now, src main Java, we will write our source code under src main Java. Whatever the Java classes that we want to create in our project, those Java classes we are going to create inside main Java folder. Already one Java class is available. It created by Spring Boot by default. That is very important class. We will understand what is that application.java. Whatever the source code we want to do, what are the classes that we want to create, those classes we are going to create inside src main Java. Okay, src main resources, we will create our configuration files under src/main/resources folder. If you want to do any configuration, customized configurations, that if you want to do like log4j configurations, such kind of configuration files we are going to keep inside resources folder. src test Java, it is used to write unit test classes. We will create JUnit classes under src test Java folder. Okay, we will create JUnit classes under src test Java folder. What are the dependencies we have added in our project? Those dependencies will be downloaded. Those jars will be displayed here. What are the classes we are creating inside the main Java and test Java? Those classes will be compiled. The compiled .class files will be created inside target folder. Target folder contains .class files. pom.xml, that is the Maven configuration file. Any dependencies that we want to add in our project, those dependencies we are going to write inside our pom.xml file. Right. Now, if you see in this project, by default, we got one class application.java and we got one file application.properties. Application.java class, which is created by default, it is called as start class in the Spring Boot. When we create a boot application, either by using initializer website or by using IDE, this class will be generated. This class is called as start class in the Spring Boot. If you see here, I have given application.java. This is called start class. This is very important class in the Spring Boot. This is called as start class in the Spring Boot. What is the meaning of start class? The start class is the entry point for boot application execution. When we run our Spring Boot application, right click on this project, we have created this project, right click on this project, run as boot application. Spring Boot application execution will begin from this start class only. It is the entry point for boot application execution. So just 2 to 3 lines of code is available, but it will take 3 to 4 hours to understand about this start class. It is very important class. So many things are happening internally with this start class. We have to understand the internals of the start class. So now in Spring, when we create the boot application, by default application.java class is created. That Java class is called as start class. It is the entry point for boot application execution. And here one properties file is also created by default, which is called application.properties. Any configurations that you want to do in the boot application, like I want to connect with the database. So database properties, data source properties we want to configure. You can configure here. I want to send email, SMTP properties. I will configure here. I want to configure security. Security properties you can configure. Like this, the configurations of our boot application can be done by using this application.properties file. Some people, instead of using properties file, they will go for YML. We can change the properties to YML file also. Observe carefully. Right click on the properties, convert the dot properties to .yml. Click on OK. Now, instead of the properties file, we can use the YML file also. Spring Boot supports for both .properties file as well as .yml file for the configuration. Are you guys clear with project creation? Are you guys clear with the project creation and project folder structure? Creating the project in two ways. One is initializer website, another one is using IDE. When we create the project, we are using Maven as a build tool. So this is the Maven project folder structure. SRC main Java. SRC main Java. Here we are going to create the source code of our application. In the Spring Boot, by default, one class created that is called application.java, that is called as start class of the Spring Boot. In the SRC main resources, application.properties available. Instead of the properties file, you can use application.yml also for the configuration. Sir, what is the difference between properties file and YML file? Both are used for configuration purpose only, but properties file is the old approach, YML file is the latest approach. So how to work with the properties file and YML files, we will understand in the coming classes. This is not the right time to discuss about the differences between these two. For a time being, understand that in this Spring Boot, we will use properties file or YML file for the configuration purpose. Data source configurations, log4j configurations, SMTP configurations, application messages configurations we are going to do in the properties file or in the YML file. SRC test Java will be available. In this folder, we are going to write unit test classes of our application. If you want to perform unit testing for your project by using JUnit, those JUnit classes we are going to create inside test Java. And the Maven dependencies folder is available. It contains the jars which got downloaded. The dependencies we are going to configure in the pom.xml. The dependencies will be downloaded and jar files will be available. So here we are writing the source code and here we are writing the JUnit code. Those classes will compile, .class files will generate. The .class files will be created inside target folder. Okay. So source code we are going to write inside main Java. Configuration files will create under main resources. Unit test code we will write under test Java folder. Project dependencies we will configure. Project dependencies we will configure in pom.xml file. POM stands for project object model. POM stands for project object model. In that file we are going to configure our dependency. In Spring Boot application, by default, one Java class got created. This Java class is called as start class of the Spring Boot. What is start class in the Spring Boot? Very, very important. What is start class in Spring Boot? When we create boot application, by default, one class will be created with a name called application.java, that is called as start class. When we create a boot application, by default, one Java class will be created with a name application.java. With a name application.java, that is called as start class. With a name application.java, that is called as start class of Spring Boot. Start class is the entry point for boot application execution. Start class is the entry point for boot application execution. Start class is the entry point for boot application execution. Now, this is the code which is available inside the start class. Just 2 lines. Right. What is start class in the Spring Boot? When we create a boot application, one Java class created by default with a name called application.java. That Java class is called as start class. Start class is the entry point for boot application execution. Now here, for this class, we are using one annotation and we are having a main method. So Spring Boot application execution will start from main method only. Whether it is a standalone application or whether it is a web application, the execution will begin from main method only. Sir, for web applications, we don't need main method now. But here you are telling that boot application will start from main method. If you go for generally we will use servlets to develop the web application. For the web application, main methods are not required. For normal Java applications execution, main method is required. But when it comes to the Spring Boot, main method is mandatory in the start class, irrespective of the type of the project. Whether it is a standalone project or whether it is a web application or whether it is a REST API or whether it is a microservice, whatever it is, every Spring Boot application will contain a start class with a main method. Without this start class, you cannot execute the Spring Boot project. Executing the Spring Boot project without start class is not possible. Start class is a mandatory class to run the boot application. Can you guys please read this? What is the start class in the Spring Boot? When we create boot application, by default one Java class will be created with the name application.java, that is called as start class of the Spring Boot. Start class is the entry point for boot application execution. If you observe this start class, inside the start class there is one annotation called boot application annotation. We are having a main method. Inside the main method we are calling run method. Sir, what is this annotation? What is this run method? We have to understand that. Then only we can understand how Spring Boot application is executing internally. How we can understand how the Spring Boot application is executing internally if you get the clarity on start class of this Spring Boot. Okay, let's understand this start class, guys. If you see annotation, if you open this annotation, internally there are several other annotations also available. Spring Boot configuration is one annotation. Spring Boot auto configuration is one annotation. Component scan is one annotation. That means Spring Boot application annotation is equal to 3 annotations. One annotation, that is a Spring Boot application, which is equal to these 3 annotations. Spring Boot application annotation is equal to below 3 annotations. Spring Boot application annotation, Spring Boot application annotation is equal to below 3 annotations. Boot configuration, auto configuration and component scan. We will understand what is this component scan, what is this auto configuration and all. First, let's understand this start class. So when we create the boot application, this start class is created and it is entry point for boot application execution. In this start class, we have one annotation. That one annotation is equal to below 3 annotations. Boot configuration, enable auto configuration and component
scan. And the next one, here inside the main method, we are calling spring application.run method. Inside this run method, lot of code will be available that is called as bootstrapping application. Spring Boot application is getting started from this run method only. What is there inside the run method? What is the importance of the run method? Let's understand the importance of the run method. Go inside this run method. Go inside this run method. Go inside this run method. Oh, can you see that lot of code is available inside the run method? This code is called as, this logic is called as bootstrapping logic. So we are saying that Spring Boot is doing so many things internally. Why it is doing, how it is doing? Internally, it is executing some code. Already they developed some code. So that is the code available inside the run method. Inside the run method, some logic is available. That logic is called as bootstrapping logic in the Spring Boot. Now, when you see run as boot application, when we run the boot application, here one banner is printing, and it is starting the application, and it is printing the time, how much time it took to start the application. All the details are printing on the console. Application started and application terminated. How this application started? From this start class, the application execution started. Main method is executed. Inside the main method, we are calling Spring application.run method. It is a predefined static method available in the Spring application class. Inside this run method, lot of code is available. That code is called as bootstrapping logic. Running the Spring application, creating and refreshing a new application context, everything. IOC container creation, environment preparation, banner printing, refreshing the container, calling the runners in the Spring Boot, returning the IOC container reference, everything is taken care by run method. So run method is called as entry point for boot application. Run method contains bootstrapping logic. Spring application.run method contains Spring application.run method. Spring application.run method contains bootstrapping logic. Bootstrapping logic. It is the entry point. It is the entry point for boot application execution. So what is the logic? What is the logic available in this run method, guys? Inside this run method, start one stopwatch. Start the stopwatch. Start listeners. Start the listeners. Then load, prepare the environment. Prepare environment. Print banner. Print banner. Create IOC container. Create IOC container. Refresh container. Refresh container. Print time taken to start the application. Print time taken. Stop the stopwatch. Stop that stopwatch. Print time taken to start application. Call the runners. Call runners. Return IOC reference. These all are the activities are happening inside our run method. This is called as bootstrapping logic of our Spring Boot application. This is called as bootstrapping logic of our Spring Boot application. Right? Inside the Spring Boot, start class is created. Start class is very important to execute the boot application. Without this start class, we can't execute the boot application. Start class contains this annotation called @boot application. That annotation is equal to below three annotations. Spring Boot configuration, enable auto configuration. What is component scan. We will understand about these annotations in the tomorrow session. So Spring application run method contains bootstrapping logic. Bootstrapping logic means the logic which is used to start the application, not the CSS bootstrap, guys. Don't think about the CSS bootstrap. Here it is a bootstrapping, nothing but the logic which is using to start the application, that is called as bootstrapping. Spring application run method contains bootstrapping logic. It is the entry point for boot application execution. So what is the bootstrapping logic available inside this? Lot of code is available. We have to understand that code, right? It is starting a time, calculating what is the start time, creating bootstrap context, running the listeners, loading the arguments, preparing the environment, printing the banner, creating IOC container, refreshing the container, calculating the end time, start time and end time minus start time, total time it has taken to start the application, call the runners. What are the runners also we have to discuss. Call the runners, finally return the IOC reference. So what is the return type of the run method? Run method will return configurable application context, which is the reference of the IOC container, system.out.println, here context.getBean.getName, context.getClass.getName, context.getClass.getName. See what is the name of this bean. Right click, run as boot application. You see what is the name? Annotation config application context. That means run method used this class internally to start the IOC container. Here as a programmer, I am starting the IOC container, or IOC container starting by the run method. Programmer is starting the IOC container, or Spring Boot is starting the IOC container. Programmer starting the IOC container, or Spring Boot is starting the IOC container. Spring Boot is starting the IOC container. Where is the logic to start the IOC container? Where the logic available to start the IOC? Is it available in this annotation, or is it available inside the run method? Because starting the IOC container is not only my project requirement. In every Spring application, we need to start the IOC container to manage the dependency injection. Why every programmer should start the IOC container? Boot only will start the IOC container. If you run your boot application, it is going to start the execution from the start class. Inside the start class, main method will be available. Main method is going to execute. In the main method, we are calling Spring application.run method. Inside the run method, logic is available to start the IOC. So that is one of the auto configuration feature. You no need to start the IOC container. Boot will take care of starting the IOC container required for your project. The logic is available inside the run method to start the IOC container. Are you guys clear with my point? Now see what is happening inside this run method. Sir, what is this annotation? I told you that annotation is equal to 3 annotations. We will understand this annotation in the tomorrow session. The Spring Boot application annotation is available here. This annotation is available at the class level. That annotation is equal to 3 annotations. I need to tell you what is a component scan, what is auto configuration, what is boot configuration. Then only you will understand what is this annotation. In the tomorrow session, we will understand this annotation. Don't worry. Okay. Now, what is the start class in the Spring Boot? Guys, can you please tell me what is start class in the Spring Boot? Start class is the entry point for boot application execution. So two important things that we need to understand in the start class. One is this annotation, another one is run method. Spring Boot application, one annotation it is using, that annotation is equal to 3 annotations. One annotation is equal to 3 annotations. What are those 3 annotations? Boot configuration, auto configuration, and component scan. And we are having run method. Run method internally having lot of logic. So tomorrow we are going to concentrate on run method logic and this annotation. Got my point, guys? So in the tomorrow session we are going to do the postmortem on the run method on this annotation that we are going to discuss in the tomorrow session. Okay guys, from tomorrow can we start the session at 6:45? I want to spend 1.5 hours for the session from tomorrow because the main content started for the Spring Boot. Can we start the session at 6:45 from tomorrow? Yeah, please join the class tomorrow at 6:45. Please join the session at 6:45. So from tomorrow, I'm going to take the session from 6:45 every day. The class will be there from 6:45 to 7:15 from tomorrow. I'm uploading this class notes in our portal. Yeah, right guys, the notes got uploaded 6:45 to 7:15. From tomorrow, class will be available from 6:45 to 7:15 a.m. Thank you.